The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the military parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question.
Questions for you.
Sure.
Over the weekend, Secretary Noem sent a memo to the Pentagon asking Secretary Hegseth to have and direct the military that's on the ground in LA to arrest and detain what she said were lawbreakers. Is the president okay with that? And under what authority would the members of the military be able to arrest people inside the United States?
I can't speak for a letter that came from the Department of Homeland Security. I can't speak for the president and what's currently happening on the ground now. And as you know, the president federalized the National Guard under U.S. Code 10, which he has the authority to do. And our United States Marines and the National Guardsmen and women who are on the ground right now are helping to create a peaceful environment for ICE and Border Patrol, who were being, again, hailed with rocks, who were being violently and viciously attacked. They needed reinforcements, and so our United States Marines who are on the ground are providing those reinforcements to ensure the environment is peaceful so that these raids and deportations can continue.
But he realizes they can't actually arrest people unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, which, I mean, seemingly was not something that was in Secretary Noem's memo, a clear distinction she did not make there.
Again, you're trying to conflate a letter that was sent to the Department of Homeland Security to the president's legal authority. The president understands the legal authority that he invoked, and that's the current situation right now.
When it comes to federalizing the National Guard, what is the specific criteria that the president is using for when he's deciding to do that, and in which states?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He wants to see an end to the chaos and the violence. He doesn't want to see law enforcement officers being attacked. He wants to see peace. He wants law-abiding Californians to be able to bring their kids to school, to be able to go to work without seeing this violence in the streets. That's what the president's hoping for, and that's why he's taken this action. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Two questions on two separate topics. One has to do with the military parade taking place here in Washington this weekend. There's a lot of security around the White House complex, around the Capitol complex, even along the tidal basin. Is that just proactive? Are you expecting anything in particular in terms of unrest like we've seen in Los Angeles?
These are proactive security measures to protect those marching in the parade, many of whom will be veterans and our brave men and women in uniform and Gold Star families. There's going to be military families from around the country who are flying into this parade. And of course, it's to protect the spectators who will be enjoying this incredibly patriotic show on Saturday, and I hope you all join us there.
And then secondly, Secretary Pete Hegseth testified on the Senate side of the Capitol today,
Yes.
And he was asked about America's, the administration's view of Vladimir Putin's intentions, and specifically it was asked whether or not his intentions go beyond, his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine. When that question was posed to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane replied that he does believe that his territorial ambitions go beyond Ukraine, but Secretary Hegseth says it's not clear at this point. How does the president view this issue?
The president has spoken on this. He said, as he calls it, he believes Ukraine was always the apple of Putin's eye, and he made it very clear to Putin in his first term not to invade Ukraine. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because of President Trump's peace through strength foreign policy agenda and the effective deterrence policies that he implemented in the first term. Unfortunately, because of the weakness and incompetence of the previous administration, Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade Ukraine, and now we have this brutal war which the president is working very hard to end. Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president warned that any protests on Saturday would be met with force. Can you clarify what kind of protest President Trump does support or find acceptable?
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
One question. So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the militant parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Caroline.
Raquel, and then I can go to you, Francis. Go.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have two questions. One about Israel. Yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to Israel said the U.S. no longer is pursuing the goal of an independent Palestinian state. Can you confirm that the president is no longer supporting a two-state solution? And is President Trump considering diplomatic action against countries who takes action against Israel during next week UN conference?
Right now, the president views the situation in Israel and Gaza as deeply unfortunate and needing to end. And the president is realistic about the current state of affairs in this region of the world. And that's why the president has said the number one focus and priority of the administration is to release all of the hostages from Gaza and to end this conflict as soon as possible. The administration is still pushing very hard for the release of all the hostages. And as for what happens next, clearly Gaza is an uninhabitable place. It needs to be rebuilt with the help of our Arab partners, and the president wants to see that happen as well. Take a couple
Just one on the G7 engagement. President Trump is traveling there on Sunday. Other presidents beyond the G7 leaders are also going. President Lula from Brazil, President Sheinbaum from Mexico, and President Zelensky from Ukraine are also going. Do you have confirmation if President Trump is meeting any other leaders on the sideline of the G7?
Yes.
To know about the Lula engagement with Lula.
I can confirm there will be quite a few bilateral meetings between the president and other foreign leaders. The White House is still working very hard to finalize that schedule, and we will provide that for you as soon as we have it.
Great.
Thanks, Caroline. Just back to the China trade deal, can you talk about the status of the export controls that the U.S. imposed? Are those no longer being imposed?
We are fully complying with the Geneva Agreement. Go ahead. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. One foreign question for you and one domestic. The foreign, the president, of course, has said he would lift sanctions on Syria. Is there an executive order coming along soon to go do that? And is the president planning to try to get involved in any kind of a peace agreement between Israel and Syria that would disengage those two?
To the best of my knowledge, the Treasury Department took action after the president made that announcement in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. And then on the domestic side, you were just asked about the First Amendment rights issues. In the president's comments yesterday, though, he just said protesters would be strongly dealt with. In your list before, you referred to insurrectionists, rioters, and protesters together. Obviously, they're quite different from your earlier answer. I'm struck by the fact that the president has not at any point said the most important thing here is to protect the First Amendment rights of peaceful protesters. So I'm wondering, where in his hierarchy of interests does he place that? Is the First Amendment protection the most important? Is stopping violence most important? Why is he not out saying all peaceful protesters will be protected?
I think two things can be important at the same time. And the president, as I just answered, supports the right of Americans to peacefully protest. He supports the First Amendment. But that is not the majority of the behavior that we have seen taking place in Los Angeles. We have seen mobs of violent rioters and agitators assaulting law enforcement officers, assaulting our federal immigration authorities. And we have seen, as I said, this goes back to what this administration is trying to do and accomplish, and that's enforcing law and order in our nation's communities. And it's removing public safety threats from communities in Los Angeles.
You're saying the majority have not been peaceful, the majority have been violent.
I just read for you the arrest numbers. We've arrested nearly 400 illegal aliens alone, just illegal aliens who have been arrested in these riots since June 6th, since they began.
Thousands of people on the streets.
Yeah, and we've had hundreds of people who have assaulted law enforcement officers. Are you saying that that's that's appropriate behavior?
No,
Are you
no,
saying
I'm not
that
saying
the
that at all. I'm
shouldn't
just
take
trying to
action.
figure out.
The Democrat governor and the Democrat mayor of Los Angeles have failed their citizens. And the majority of Americans, the majority of Californians, do not want to see law enforcement officers being assaulted in the streets. And thankfully, the president took action and stepped in to protect our federal law enforcement agents, to protect federal buildings, to protect the federal mission of deporting illegal criminals off of our streets. And that mission will continue every day as far as we're concerned.